Hi, I'm Dwight Lemke. We're back again talking about negotiation. Today, I think we need to leave the theoretical realm behind us, if you will, to talk about what I would call, as a Midwesterner, getting down to brass tacks or negotiating in the real world. When we sit across the table from our other team of negotiators, what we're engaging in here is trying to influence the other side. So we need to come up with strategies of influence. So what we're trying to do is amass support for our proposal. And its ability to sell our ideas, but not our proposal so much, persuade reluctant opponents, convince others regarding the merits of our case. And as I said, we don't want to sell so much as we want to influence, and there's a fine line here. Some ways to go about this are pretty basic. First of all, it sometimes makes sense to highlight their potential losses as opposed to their potential gains. Not, here's what we can do for you. Or, you can say, well, we're offering this, but if you don't take it, it could be bad for you. That somewhere along the line, you're going to need what we're able to do for you, that by not doing a deal with us, you're actually losing in the process. So, because again, we go back to the idea that people value gains and losses differently. We're trying to turn the idea of walking away from the table into a loss for them. Want to disaggregate their gains and aggregate their losses. A couple of words you probably haven't used in the past. But think about this. To maximize pleasure, you've got to separate the total gain into lots of small wins. Conversely, to minimize pain, we should put all the losses together. That only gives you one loss to absorb. It's that whole Band-Aid argument. You want to pull it off all at one time. You do. You don't want to do it over weeks. It's like having a bad tooth. You want to get it done now, not 6 months down the road. So what we're trying to do here is disaggregate their gains and aggregate their losses, conversely, so that we're going to stretch out their pain if they walk away. And we're going to extend their pleasure if they cut the deal with us. Another way to go about this is to employ the door-in-the-face technique, which I find fascinating. Reading Malhotra and Bazerman, they said that one way to get yes is to allow the other party to say no first. And they offer the wonderful example of the guy who's trying to get people to donate some of their labor to a charity. He says, well, can you give us a week? No. Can you give us a day? Well, sure, why not? And what they did there was that after making the initial offer, people felt regretful because, people like to be helpful. They like to be agreeable. So we offer them a ridiculous kind of strategy, a ridiculous kind of answer. And they reject that option, but then we give them one that's not so ridiculous. We're going to increase the chances that they say yes. So what happens is, they look at our extreme offer, and then they compare it to our more reasonable one and go, well, yeah, okay, this is so much better. We feel good about this one now. We're going to go ahead and do it. Of course, the other one is the foot in the door technique, where we get people to agree to small things and then lead them to big things. Why? Because, if you've ever done survey research, you very quickly learn that if you get people in the mode of answering questions, Mr., Mrs., is this the address? How long have you lived here? Blah, blah, blah. Then pretty soon we can start asking people serious questions because now they're starting to nod their head. They're in an agreeable kind of mode. And that's what the foot in the door technique does. We get them to accept a small initial request, and then, they're already in. We're taking advantage of their inability to walk away from sunk costs. But people have this motivation to justify past decisions and to preserve consistency, and we take advantage of that. And that idea of justification is terribly powerful. Some fascinating research done that no matter how ridiculous your excuses, your justification for what you're about to do, as long as you give one, people are more likely to say yes. Excuse me, can I cut in line because I need to get there before you do? Completely ridiculous justification. But you'll find that if you tell people, go, okay. Dwight, will you accept my homework late because it's late? I know the research, but it might work on somebody. But the crazier, the fact that you've got a justification helps a lot. So you can find a way to justify your position, people are going to be more likely to go along with it. Our strategy number 6 is this idea of leverage the idea of social proof. But Mom, all the kids are going. If your mother was as smart as mine, that one didn't work very often. But it's an attempt, right? It's social proof. If there's uncertainty and ambiguity, let's look at the fact that other people are doing this. That's going to increase the chances that people are going to agree with you. The 7th strategy, we can make unilateral concessions, make token ones. It's the trust and the reciprocity of gifts. I used to do some seminars at the University of Wisconsin Medical College on this idea of the relationship between physicians and pharmaceutical companies. And look around, your physician's office next time you're there, and look at the prescription pads, look at the pens, look at the charts on the wall, and look at the drug companies' names underneath. You think these companies are being altruistic? No. What happens when you give a gift, no matter how small, it creates a reciprocity bond. So people say, well, they did something nice for me. So now I need to do something nice for them. So by making these token unilateral concessions, they kind of owe you. At least there's a psychological owing that they have going on. Our strategy number 8 here is to use reference points and to make our conflicts or demands seem reasonable. Because people are open to influence. Well, 9 out of 10 folks have done it this way. The desire to get a good or a fair deal makes people, susceptible to influence. But remember, the other side's as smart as we are. They negotiate as well as we do. They know everything that we know. At least that's a pretty safe assumption when we're going to sit down. So how do we defend ourselves against all these strategies of influence? What if they come out of the table, with some fresh baked chocolate chip cookies? We go, oh, shit. Now they've created this bond of reciprocity, and they're going to get something off us just for baking the damn cookies. Well, maybe not. We can insulate ourselves somewhat from these. First of all, we can prepare systematically. As I said before, you don't sit down at that table without preparation. But if we do this systematically, we're not going to fall for something like that. We're not going to be influenced by their influence peddling. We can create a scoring system. Well, we've gotten this, we've gotten that, that we've given this, and we're going to weight that on how much of it we gave. We're going to weight it on its importance to us, its importance to them. And what that will do is tend to mitigate the problem of influence. Our defensive strategy number 3 is to separate information from influence. Everything the other side says is in part information and in part influence. Try to focus on the info and avoid the spin. Number 4, we can rephrase their offer in other terms. What I hear you saying is, number 5, our old friend, the devil's advocate, comes back in. Why? Because it works. We got against one of our team whose only job is to make sure that they critique our presentation, our agreement, while we're in the privacy of our own little room there, so that when we go back to the negotiating table, we know the weaknesses in it. Number 6, try not to negotiate under time pressure. Okay, you've got exactly 12 minutes to make that deal. If you call and you're one of the first 30 callers, we'll throw in the steak knives. Don't negotiate under pressure. Walk away. You've got time. Well, if you don't buy this house, these other folks are going to. Okay, if that's what was meant to be, it was what was meant to be. Those high pressure tactics, those time tactics are meant to get us to agree. So try to avoid negotiating their time pressure. Use all the time that you've got. Don't let them stall for time either. So, the problem with influence strategies is that people tend to rely on them a bit too much. So if we rely exclusively on them, we're only going to have limited success for a couple of reasons. One, if we focus in on selling, that is influencing, we're going to forgo opportunities to learn from the folks across the table because we're not really listening to them. We're just focusing in on our pitch. Second, if we're up against a tough negotiator or embroiled in a very bitter dispute, our ability to get the other side to comply or agree just might be severely weakened. Now, remembering that people are people. People are going to have blind spots in negotiation, things they just don't see. Part of it's psychological biases. Some of it's because of a phenomenon called bounded awareness. We tend to focus in narrowly. In military, they'd call it target fixation. We're focused in on here, stuff happening over here we're not paying any attention to, but that might be terribly important. And if that's happening at the negotiating table, we're undermining our own cause. So what is important to us, and how do we try to keep everything there? Well, we need to expand our awareness. And this isn't some hippy-dippy thing going to an ashram and meditating. What we're trying to do here is just to look as broadly as possible for information that might or might not be relevant. We're going to filter out a lot of bad information that way, there's no question about it, but there might be something out of it that's terribly important to us, and that we don't want to lose. So if we've gotten past our blind spots, now it comes to the fact that we've got that other side of people that isn't so savory. Lies and deception. Every negotiator's got to deal with lies and deception. Why? Because people are people. They've got the same pressures on them as we have on us. If they don't get the deal, their boss told them they better not come back to the office. They need this deal to get promoted. They see themselves on the fast track. And when people have a lot of stuff on the table, they might be inclined to take shortcuts, no matter how odious that might be. So that darker side of negotiation, we need to make it less likely that people are going to lie to us, and then try to detect them when they do. And of course, avoid our own idea. The best defense against lies and deception is to eliminate our counterpart's temptation to lie. So we need to make it clear to them, why they shouldn't lie to us. Look prepared. If we're unprepared, why shouldn't they lie? Because they figure they can get away with it. But if we arrive on time, if we have our strategy documents ready, we're organized, we're efficient. If we have all the information at our fingertips, they're going to assume maybe we can't get away with this. I mean, you've seen those people on the stand, where the prosecutor or the assisting attorney asks them a question, and because they panic, they lie, because they don't know what the prosecutor knows. It says, "Oh, so is this your signature on this document, sir?" Well, because they didn't think that the prosecutor had taken time to prepare, so they got away with the lie. So we need to be on the top of our games, so that we're seen to be on top of our games, so that they're not going to do that. We might want to signal our ability to obtain information. If you have ways of knowing, that's probably not going to work real well, but the fact is, if you show yourself to be very informed, they're going to assume, that you are very informed, and you've got ways of figuring this stuff out, that you're not going to fall for, whatever story they're telling you. If we see that they're getting tense, and we'll get to that in a minute, how you know that. Well, there are questions almost guaranteed to get the other side to lie, so we need to avoid asking those. You might famously recall that mafia dons were hauled into court and asked what's called perjury traps. Ask a question that no reasonable human being would ever tell the truth to. And when they lie, you've got them for perjury. Well, what types of questions that could we ask are going to elicit that same kind of response? How do we do that? Well, We need to ask less threatening, more indirect questions to come at the truth from around the back 40 as opposed to taking it head on. Being blunt here will just put people on the defensive. Let's avoid increasing the pressure on them that might force them to lie. Defense strategy number 4, don't lie. I know it makes life easier. Aunt Susie's polka dot dress looks terrible on her. Those little white lies that we get away with in the rest of our life have no business being in a business relationship. Why? Because we'll get found out. Even if we don't get found out, the fact that you risked it over something trivial is just stupid on your part. So if you start lying, why shouldn't they? If we keep telling the truth, even uncomfortable truths, they're much less likely to engage in prevarication. Well, there's also the idea of lie detection, though. How do we look them in the eye? You ever watch the World Series of Poker? Some of the poker players are wearing dark glasses or tinted lenses. It's their belief, and there's some research to back this up, that they can tell when somebody's bluffing. It's called a tell in poker. Well, there's a psychologist by the name of Paul Ekman, who spent decades measuring the ability of people to distinguish truth from lies, has concluded that the average person, you and I, are a really bad lie detector. In fact, if you look at people who professionally should know, policemen, judges, customs agents, they all have one thing in common. We're about accurate to the ability of a coin toss. That's not very good if you can only guess 50% of the time. Ekman himself is probably good to about 80%, which is kind of scary. The only people that don't tend to fall under this, are like Secret Service agents. Why? Because they're trained to watch people. Ekman focused on telltale signs such as pupil dilation, changes in voice pitch, facial micro-expressions. What the hell is a micro-expression? Well, a micro-expression takes place in less than a quarter of a second. Go on, like that. And they're distinguished by time and length. And Ekman basically videotaped people back in, so he's been doing this for a long time, back in the VCR phase, and then played it back slowly. What he'd do is he'd get people to lie. And he'd just watch their facial expression. And it turns out that going through some of his training, I'm doing a class myself online right now with him, you can improve your ability to tell whether people are lying or not. Should you need to do this? Probably not. But at the very least, you should be able to read people's body language. Are they bored? Are they interested? Are they angry? See, if you're not picking up on those kind of cues, you got no business sitting down at a table. That somewhere along the line, you need to pay attention to those folks over there and not just worried about making your pitch. You watch those people, you find out what they're paying attention to, you watch how they're reacting to it. I don't think that's going to be a good reaction if you just offered him your best possible case, right? See, you need to pay attention. I mean, if you want to learn about this stuff, read about it. There's some videos that we're presenting online. Do a YouTube search. I mean, or enroll in one of Ekman's classes if it makes you feel better. But the simple matter of fact is that you need to be able to learn how to read people, to read body language, and to know what your own body language, is expressing. When you go in for that job interview, if you're sitting back like this, you're not getting the job. Unless they're looking for someone who tests out lounge chairs. What you need to do is be interested, to look forward, to lean forward, to nod your head. Remember making those listening sounds when you're doing active listening? Yeah? All that kind of stuff is something that you need to think about. What am I projecting? What are they projecting? And take it into account when you're sitting at the negotiation table. It's not superfluous information by far, and can actually be very helpful to you. Well, Once again, thanks for listening. We'll get together again very soon. Bye-bye.